Let us now apply this principle to the copper wire which carries a current. The wire is still. It does not move. Motion spins around its surface in rings, which are centered by holes, where gravity sits and rules each ring. The wire is horizontal, but motion is vertical in the plane of its spinning. The wire is a series of gravity centers which make of it a seeming shaft. The wire shaft does not move, yet it performs the tremendous work of lifting thousands of tons and driving thousands of engines and other machines, and it could easily kill a man if motion, which encircled the wire, collided with the man. Our senses very plainly and truthfully tell us that the wire is not moving, but if a speeding bullet traveling along the path occupied by the wire, our senses untruthfully tell us that the speed of the horizontal moving bullet killed the man, instead of the vertically spinning motion. It may be a long time in man's unfolding before he can differentiate between what his mind knows and his senses believe they know. But new thinking must someday come to man, which is based upon mind knowing instead of body sensing. Let us now bend the copper wire into a semicircle to symbolize a wave, and send a current through it. We have now curved our gravity shaft and our planes of motion which spin around it at an angle of 90 degrees and are no longer parallel. They all point in the direction of the center of a circle, and our senses tell us that that center is the common center of gravity for all of those converging radial lines. That is another misleading illusion, which our senses believe in implicitly, but it is not true to nature. We must give space enough to very briefly tell what the mind knows in respect to the curvature of gravity, which the senses cannot sense. To help visualize this, let us first disturb the horizontal plane of calm water and bend it into a semicircular wave as we bent the wire. The electric compression pressure registered 15 pounds per square inch before the water was disturbed. It now registers less above the surface and more in the trough of the next wave. The gravity shaft curves as electric pressures curve. Our senses tell us that the wave shaft is moving up and down. Also, they tell us that they are moving right and left. We speak of the speed in which light waves travel, which is proof that we believe that they do travel, when they but move up and down. Light waves reproduce at great speed, but light does not travel at any speed. These are the things our senses tell us, but our mind knows that the only direction of motion is the electric direction of circles, which spin around gravity shafts to cause effects which our senses thoroughly believe in, but which are not factual. Light does not travel. It only appears to, and that appearance is limited to the boundaries of its own electric wave field. We do not yet know the universal radar principle which repeats ever happening anywhere to everywhere. Our senses are mightily confused between zero cause and dual effect. The greatest and most visibly evident proof of the fact that the universe of suns and earths is made up of pairs of rings, and that they disintegrate by throwing off pairs of rings, is to look at the greatly magnified pictures of such planets as Jupiter and Saturn, and such ring nebula as Lyra, and the others on that same page. The great telescopes very clearly show the parallel wrinkles on Jupiter, which make its surface look like heavy corduroy. The fact that all such planets and suns oblate proves that and then it says, unfortunately this page is missing number 224, and number 225. So I will take up where it begins again, and we have 2 pages of missed words, and I'm really sorry about that. Figure 61 will graphically diagram this effect, but figures 17 to 29 will help to clarify them still farther by closely studying them, especially figures 17 and 18, and comparing one with another. When you have done this, you will no longer accept the possibility of such an effect in nature as the nuclear atom shown in figure 58. Also, you will more clearly comprehend the marvels of the advance in electronics, which is making such marvelous strides against the resistance of sense believing in things which the mind knows to be otherwise. Perhaps the greatest blow to the nuclear atom theory is the fact that it claims that each consecutive atom in all of the elements from hydrogen to uranium changes its substance by the addition of one more electron revolving around its nucleus and a balancing number of protons in the nucleus. For this reason, it numbered the elements from 1 to 92 at the time the theory was conceived. That meant that hydrogen had 1 electron revolving around its nucleus, helium had 2, lithium had 3, etc., up to uranium, which had 92. No more inconsistent and fantastic concept could possibly have been formed than this, for it has not the slightest resemblance to nature's processes whatsoever. It assumes that hydrogen is the first element of creation, instead of the 18th, and gives numbers to isotopes which are split tones in the same measure that it gives to full tones. It has not allowed for the possible discovery of new elements for which it could have no numbers to give it. This embarrassing situation actually arose when it was discovered that hydrogen was not the first element. The discovery of deuterium and tritium in the hydrogen octave threw that whole theory in the wastebasket. But science met that danger by calling the new tones isotopes. Even then they had no numbers for these isotopes, although they had numbers for the 49 other isotopes, which you can see in figure 5 as they arrange themselves on either side of their wave amplitudes in the 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th octaves. This unnatural concept destroys itself by its impossibility to conform to the chemical law of valence, which gives equality in multiplication and potential to mate pairs in each octave, instead of 92 consecutive multiplications, which ignored the octave wave pulsation principle. Let us analyze this briefly to throw light upon this impossibility of nature. All through this book, we have shown how God divides every effective motion into equal pairs in 9 consecutive waves. It is the most basic principle of creation, for polarization is founded upon it. All through the 9 octaves, all full tones are divided into 4 equal mate pairs. The first 3 of these pairs are equal and opposite atomic ring units, which increase their potential from 1 to 4. The 4th pair in each octave is united as hemispheres, such as carbon, and is the maximum potential of its octave wave. The law of valence recognizes the progression of multiplied potential and classifies these mate equalities by giving the first pair a valence of 1, such as lithium and fluorine. It gives a valence of 2 to the second pair, such as beryllium and oxygen. The third pair has an acknowledged increase of potential, which gives it a valence of 3, as in boron and nitrogen. And the fourth pair, the carbon hemispheres, have a valence of 4. We will point out the havoc this concept would play in science if we tried to uphold the principle by endeavoring to fit it into nature's scheme. Lithium, for example, is given 3 electrons, and its equal mate, fluorine, is given 9. 9 electrons to 3 overpowers one of the mates and destroys its polarization equality. Much worse than that, however, its 9 electrons make fluorine, which is a very light gas with a below zero melting point, superior in potential to carbon, which has only 6 electrons, even though it has the great density which requires a temperature of 3600 degrees to melt it. Carrying that comparison further, we find that bromine is given 35 electrons, and iodine, its equal mate, is given 53, which is nearly 9 times the potential given to carbon. It is not difficult to compare the potential of iron to lead, yet the number of electrons given to lead is 82, or nearly 3 times the number given to iron. To carry this analysis still further is useless, for the comparison multiplies the fault of the principle to the point of great embarrassment. It was bad enough in the early days of research, when Mendeleev gave atomic weights ever-increasing potential in the same manner, for he gave all of the dying elements increasingly greater atomic weights than the living ones. As an example of this inconsistency, the soft dying element lead is given an atomic weight of 206, or over 16 times the weight of the carbon atom, which is only 12. In this concept of atomic weights, iron is given as 55, or 4.5 times the weight of carbon, and tungsten is given as 184, or about 15 times the weight of the one element, which is the most fully alive, most dense, and has the highest melting point of all of them. It was as inconsistent to assume that all of the elements were progressive or sequential multiples of hydrogen as to assume that each successive element above hydrogen owed its characteristics to one more electron and proton added to those it theoretically possessed. In neither of these two cases has the octave wave been considered as starting from zero at cathode and colliding as maximum potentials at anodes. More conspicuously in error than these two above mentioned is the giving of electrons to the orbits of the inert gases, which are zero in every case and can have no atomic weight at all, for there is nothing to relate weight to in them, nor any complexity beyond the 4 undivided rings of their own construction. The final step in proving that the nuclear atom is outside of nature is the fact that such a group concept is necessarily three-dimensional, which means mass and nature does not begin three-dimensionally. It is first two-dimensional, for nature is made up of single plane units which are two-dimensional. The moment two-dimensional units are divided into pairs and unite to become mass, the three-dimensional bilateral universe appears. Let us very briefly review the process of creation in its initial stages. Mind idea must first be conceived. The conception of ideal is registered in the inert gas ring, which is forever the seed record of that ideal. That first undivided ring is two-dimensional. It has length and breadth, but not thickness. A ring is the only form in nature that can be unitary or two-dimensional or balanced in itself, for its extensions are all in one plane. The moment that anything is added to a ring, it must be added to on both sides to balance it. It cannot be added to on one side, for nature does not create hemispheres. It creates spheres. To add one ring on each side means the extension of a mind center to 3 mind centers, or a mind shaft to balance and control 3 instead of 1. To add successive pairs means to extend the mass of spheres, and that means 3 dimensions, and it also means the creation of a bilateral mass. A 3-dimensional universe is but the result of polarization. Polarization is not an extension of motion. It is an extension of omnipresent stillness into omnipresent stillness. Motion is a lever, which must have a fulcrum. As motion extends, there is always a fulcrum ever present to center it. A gravity shaft, which results from polarized division of stillness into moving pairs, is not a direction of motion, nor is it a part of creation. It is merely an indefinable mind position in the zero invisible universe. The Creator follows conception with action and reaction. The inert gases divide and extend. Motion is then created for the purpose of giving body forms to ideal. Divided and extended motion is expressed in pairs of light rings. Divided light rings must necessarily divide the white light of mind into the tensions of the color spectrum. That means the red and blue of a bilateral universe, which cannot exchange its sides, for each is interchangeably sex-conditioned. The sex strains and tensions are set up in the immovable rings of the inert gas of each octave, which is divided into pairs. Motion, tension, strain, and heat begin with the extension of motion in ring pairs from its conception in the 4 recording rings of each octave. These 4 rings of the inert gases are within each other in the same plane. They are, therefore, 2-dimensional. The moment they divide and extend into unit pairs to simulate body forms, mass begins, and the 3-dimensional cube-sphere bilateral universe appears. In other words, neither God nor man create 3-dimensional body forms before conceiving the mind image of that form. Mind images are thoughts. Body images are actions, and actions are always in pairs. Thought concepts are 2-dimensional. Actions are polarized extensions, so actions are necessarily 3-dimensional. The Bohr atom is a 3-dimensional result of action, which precedes its concept. Such a concept is entirely outside of nature, for it has no precedent in it, nor is it a part of the electric process which constructs mass. Mass is an extension of many thought concepts into many planes, and a simulation of extension of the one mind center into a gravity shaft. Summary: God, the knower, is non-dimensional. God's thinking is 2-dimensional. God's creative actions are 3-dimensional. The nuclear atom theory begins with 3-dimensional mass. It conceives groups of neutrons and protons revolving about and around each other on both sides of the spectrum. Each neutron and proton is conceived to be a 3-dimensional spherical mass in itself. In combination, they constitute a larger 3-dimensional spherical mass. 3-dimensional beginnings are impossible. The electric nature of this universe demands a division from one plane located at a cathode. Polarization is the result of that one plane division. Balanced, equal, and opposite pairs thus come into existence. Every united pair becomes an anoid, which means a hot-bodied 3-dimensional mass, which is straining explosively to return to its non-dimensional beginning, which it does, but in doing it, it leaves the record of its motion in two-dimensional thought forms in its inert gas. Prelude. God consciousness and cosmic awareness of the light of the divine presence within every man is the next step in the spiritual nature of man. Thousands and then more thousands are beginning to comprehend that inner voice in one's own mind coming from within each man. The reason for that is because the human race is still in its intellectual infancy. The dawn of mind consciousness is too recent for all men to think with their mind. Man in the mass still senses with his body. His desires are still dominated by his senses. His concepts are still sense-based. He hurts himself with his own acts and calls it evil. He conceives a personal God with vengeful human emotions. All that Jesus told the world about the unity of God and man and the location of the mind kingdom within every man has no meaning except for the very few illumined ones and the very many who now so deeply desire that illumining. Yes, God consciousness is slowly infiltrating the human race as man knows more and more how to think with his mind instead of sensing with his body. We who know God in us are desirous of illuminating the path for you to find that light of inner knowing. And when you do find it, you will then be able to say with deep knowing, I and my Father are one, and you will know all things. And the next session will be the bridge between man and God.